The year is 1526, and a plague is ravaging Korea. Deep in the forest, a royal guard unit rounds up a group of infected people and then dispatches them to keep the disease at bay. However, one girl survives, and as she screams over her mother's corpse, we fast travel to a few years later. The state of the kingdom is on thin ice, as the people and the council are losing faith in their king, Jeong-gong. The plague is still there, and with it, rumors of a monster arose. The king confronts his prime minister because he thinks he created the rumor about the monster to create panic among people, which would lead to a loss of faith in the king. The prime minister assures him that he is innocent and that the monster truly exists. The king decides to send a search party, but first he needs to find a man who will lead it. And then we meet two brothers, Yoon and Sung. The two of them are hunting together with Yoon's daughter, Ma-young. But without any luck, they go back home empty-handed, and Yoon makes porridge. He tells Ma-young to go outside and gather some herbs, and as she goes to do her job, she notices someone sneaking around, so she quickly gets her bow and arrow. She asks the man what he wants, and he replies that he is here to see the master of the house. Sung shows up out of nowhere and spooks Ma-young, and she almost shoots the man with the arrow. Yoon gets out of the house, and the visitor introduces himself as Hyu, and adds that he serves the king. Yoon drops the porridge in shock. Then the king himself appears, and he goes to have a private talk with Yoon. We found out that Yoon was his best man in the royal guard until he found Ma-young amongst a pile of dead people. Yoon became angry at the king, accusing him that his men are killing healthy people. After that, he resigned, and his brother joined him. Then they left to live in the mountains. Back in the present, the king explains the situation to Yoon and that fear is consuming people because of the rumors of the monster. He asks Yoon to lead a search party, and Yoon accepts, and the king gives him back his old sword. Somewhere in the forest, a group of priests are performing an anti-monster ritual. A poor girl is stealing their food and watching them from a distance, and suddenly, someone begins killing the priests and the girl runs off horrified. Yoon, Sung, and Ma-young arrive at the capital. Hyu finds them and tells them about the dead priests. So the group immediately goes to investigate, and the girl who saw everything tells Yoon that the monster killed them. But after investigating the butchered bodies, Yoon begins to doubt everything. After they return to the capital, Yoon and Sung see the little girl talking to an unknown man, who hands her a basket full of food before he leaves. Sung follows the man, but he quickly leaves by horse. Yoon catches up with the girl, and she admits that the man offered her food if she told everyone that the monster was behind the massacre. Yoon asks her who did it, but she tells him that she didn't see it. Soon another group of dead people pop up, and Yoon discovers strange blisters on their bodies, and unknown goo all around. Sung then notices a dead man impaled on a tree branch, and that puzzles Yoon. That night, Yoon meets with the king and tells him that he thinks that men are behind all the deaths, and that the monster doesn't exist. However, Yoon adds that the second dead group is infected by the plague somehow, and the king replies that it was the monster's doing. The next day, the king decides to send a search party, and the prime minister insists on calling the special forces. At first, the king doesn't agree with that decision, but he decides to play along and adds that he will also send a volunteer search party that Yoon will lead. The soldiers begin drafting volunteers without any mercy. When Yoon and Sung see that the ruthless soldiers gathered kids, they show everyone how different they are by sending the kids home. Yoon then sees an old man in the group and tells him to leave, but the old man replies that he will be useful because he hunted beasts in the past. Sung then notices Ma-young and tells her to leave, but she insists on joining them, so Yoon allows her. The special forces arrive, led by General Jin Yong, a ruthless man who was responsible for the slaughter at the beginning of the movie. The search begins, and as the night falls, Seong notices an old man wandering away, so he decides to follow him. He arrives at a place where the innocent were slaughtered and notices fresh blood. Yoon, Ma-young, and Hyu join him with half of the volunteers, and they decide to investigate the area. At the same time, Jin and his men slaughter the volunteers that are with them, and then they attack Yoon and the others. The good guys try to fight as best as they can, but they are defeated, and the group of 4 only remain. Jin ties Hyu and Ma-young, and at that moment, she remembers everything, how Jin commanded the slaughter, how her mother died, and how Yoon saved her. Jin orders his men to throw them in the pit, but luckily, the rope hooks onto a stone. One soldier throws a torch and fires an arrow into the pit to make sure that Ma-young and Hyu are dead, but instead, get this, he actually awakens the monster. Yes, there was a monster. And the monster gets out and starts killing everyone. Jin and the remaining personnel of special forces escape, while Yoon and Sung use the chance to go into the pit. There they find Ma-young and Hyu alive and well. The monster then returns to its lair, but the old man is there, and he tells everyone that the monster has bad eyesight, and that they need to cover themselves with goo to hide their scent. Then he leads them onward and the group finds an old underground tunnel network that leads to the capital. Soon they end up in a weird room filled with cages, and the old man explains that the former king was collecting the beasts and the monster was his possession, and the old man was taking care of it while it was a baby. However, when the revolution began, the place was destroyed and the old man freed the monster, who began feasting upon the corpses of those who died of the plague. As the old man finishes his story, the group hears the monster. The old man tells everyone to hide, and then he lures the monster with a toy that it loved when it was a baby, and then the old man traps himself and the monster to buy time for the others to escape. But then the enraged monster kills him. The group gets out of the tunnels and ends up near the palace. Yoon goes to the king and tells him everything about the monster and that the prime minister wants to take his place. Seong, Ma-young, and Hee-yu get captured outside, while the prime minister and Jin capture Yoon and the king. The prime minister then gives them a speech about how he will use the monster to rise as the king, and then he will trick everyone and tame the monster and become their savior. However, the monster doesn't really seem to be agreeing with that idea, as it begins to slaughter his people. The monster starts to create chaos and it kills Jin, and Yoon and the king use this chance to escape. At the same time, Sung and the others manage to trick the guards, they beat them up and escape as well. The fight with the monster continues in the courtyard. The prime minister orders his men to use fire arrows and hooks to capture the monster. At first they manage to get a hold of it, but then they immediately find out that the creature is more powerful as it breaks free and kills a lot of them. The king's men arrive and they take him to safety while Yoon and the others fight the special forces. After that, Yoon tells Ma-young to close the courtyard gates and orders Seung and Hee-yu to get the explosives and set them in the chamber with cages. Then he ventures out to lure the monster. Ma-young quickly goes to the gate where people are waiting and she tells them about the monster. The prime minister then arrives and Ma-young reveals his intentions to the people, who then trap him on the other side with the monster, which soon arrives and eats the prime minister in front of everyone. At the same time, Seong and Hee-yu begin setting the explosives, but they do not notice Jin, who is alive. The monster is ready to attack the people, but Yoon shoots it with an arrow and the creature follows him instead. Ma-young follows her father and soon the creature corners them in the palace. They try to hide, but one wounded soldier begs them for help and gives away their location to the monster, who hurls at them at great speed. But due to its poor eyesight, the creature crashes into one of the beams and loses consciousness briefly, buying time for Ma-young to get into the chamber. Jin attacks Sung and Hee-yu and quickly overpowers them. But to their luck, Ma-young arrives and kills Jin with an arrow. The monster wakes up and Yoon lures it into the cage. Then Yoon tells everyone to leave and locks himself up with the monster, which gets out of the cage and attacks him. Yoon then ignites the explosive and blows himself up along with the monster. After realizing what's happened, Ma-young quickly returns to the now destroyed palace to look for her father. Seong and Hee-yu join her to comfort her when she realizes that he is gone. The king arrives with the townsfolk. Ma-young notices a rope on the floor and she follows it, and as she reaches the end, she begins moving the rubble. Everyone joins her and soon they find Yoon's body. Ma-young begs him to wake up and he opens his eyes. Sung helps Ma-young and together they lift Yoon up and everybody cheers. Some time passes and we see the now married Ma-young and Hee-yu together with Sung and Yoon. They part their ways and the movie ends as Yoon turns around to take a look at his daughter once again. Leave your comments in the comment section. Also, leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and I promise to see you guys on my next recap. I love you all. Bye.